So in this session, I've got a couple of goals. One is to learn a bit about the startup advertising landscape. Then we're going to cover some of the challenges and some of the opportunities, and there's lots of both. And then my hope really is that you'll be inspired to go and find some of your own potential opportunities through the ads. And so what we're going to do is, jump in, going to do a presentation, and then any quick questions along the way, and I'll answer them. Like if I use some jargon or an acronym that's not familiar, I do have the chat screen going on the screen here, so please jump in if there's something that I say that's confusing. Otherwise, happy to hang out and do some in-depth Q&A at the end of things. So if you have whatever your company or whatever you have questions on, happy to stick around and get in depth later on. So tiny bit about myself, just kind of how we arrived here is I've been a full-time web marketer since January of 2001 now, when I started in a photo software company here in Victoria, worked in a number of different startups and wrapped up working inside of companies with a tech company out of San Diego. Commuting down there was a lot of fun. Started PlusROI in 2013, and now basically PlusROI Online Marketing is an agency that serves entrepreneurs. We have clients in Canada, the US, Australia, and Great Britain at the moment. We're courting a new Chinese client at the moment, so fingers crossed. We're a Google Premier Partner, which in their words means that we're one of the fastest growing and highest performing agencies in the country on the ad side. And we do a wide range of inbound marketing, search marketing, growth hacking, you name it. Basically anything data driven where we can sort of work on marketing where we can see and measure what's going on. And then as well, we also, relevant to Startup Week, we also have our own small startup called Jumpstart Web, which does local marketing for service businesses. And that's been a really cool experience, and that's going well for us these days as well. So with that said, let's look into our journey here as startups wanting to do some digital advertising. And so our journey involves first sort of some harsh realities that we'll discuss. Then we'll touch on the opportunity, sort of what's there, and then we're going to look at what I'd call the basics or the price of entry, things that you need to do to even consider advertising online as a startup. And then we're going to jump into what works in terms of some very specific ad formats and types that are working really well in 2020. So the harsh reality for startup challenges. One huge thing, and again, this isn't to be negative, this is really just to make sure that everybody's sort of understanding where they're starting at and sort of their realities they jump in. So the biggest thing is, as a startup, you have an empty sales funnel, whether it's a sales funnel or whether you're driving new users, whatever your process is, it takes time to get things moving, and most mature companies have, I know in our case, we've finally gotten refined on our own funnel management and CRM over the last year and a half. And so at any given time, we have about 30 prospects in our funnel that sort of drop in and become customers on quite a regular basis. And where as a startup, you're just starting from scratch. So it takes a while even just to build up knowledge and awareness and people in your funnel who might use your product, or better yet, give you some money. There are also some real competitive disadvantages to start. First off, in terms of resources, you're going to be competing against companies that are making money and are profitable in these digital advertising channels. So they're going to be able to invest more money. And on the flip side of that, they have more experience doing it. And one thing that makes it hard to get started, but makes it wonderful once you're in there, is that digital advertising, all the different platforms basically reward performance. The better you do at them, the cheaper they get, and the cheaper per lead or per customer it gets. So there. Long story short, you're paying way more per customer than the companies that are already in there. There's another thing that I came up with this term, couldn't think of a better one, but the inventor's curse. And it's not really a curse, but if you're a creative startup and you have a brand new product, maybe it's even a new product category for something, a new way of dealing with a challenge. There's not likely search volume around that because it's brand new. People aren't searching for a product that just got invented. So that's definitely another challenge. But fortunately, again, not to be negative, but it is critical if you're going to undertake digital advertising as a startup. It's 100% critical that really you understand what the journey is, because most people give up. There are definitely big startup advantages. One is that you're nimble. If you spot a new opportunity, you can be acting on it by tomorrow, literally, in digital advertising. On the flip side, sort of funny, but we're working with a larger company right now, and we got a quick start with them in August. And with their internal hierarchy, it's taken to now to get their goals set up in their analytics. So it's like 7 weeks later, and we haven't really gotten started yet. So again, versus a startup, working with a more nimble company, that would have been launched in days, sort of thing. You're also almost certainly creative in a startup. You've put something together, so you'll have opportunities and a perspective that sort of established older companies don't. And then there's something that's sort of funny, but I've seen this so many times, is that one real danger of being sort of an experienced marketer in a space is you come to you see something that doesn't work a couple times, and you come to assume that it's not going to work. As a startup, you don't have that limitation, so you can actually see things and see beyond your biases and sort of plunge ahead. So in terms of looking at some basics, I'd call it the price of entry. The first big one, and I had the great experience of going through the local Viatech accelerator called Accelerate Victoria, which is a fantastic accelerator. We took our little startup through that for a year and got off to a great start there. And one thing they really hammered on over and over and over again was validation. And at that time, it was along the lines of personally finding 20 people to use your service or product, to get the validation, the feedback from, to understand what your benefits were, and to really to understand that you have a product market fit. And again, I can't say how important it is to do that. It requires some discipline, but very few startups, at least that we've encountered, really fully flesh out that process and get that real offline validation and personal validation before jumping into digital advertising. And that, from a cost perspective, is just brutal. Because if you don't know exactly how your product market fit is looking and how it works, you're going to be stumbling in the digital advertising. You're not going to be quite sure who you're advertising to. And that said, you can do some validation online. In fact, in theory, you could do all your validation online. It's just that it would cost an arm and a leg. And we have gone through that process with some larger funded startups, and actually had some fun doing it. But unless you're extremely well funded and understand how much you're going to be spending to do that, there really is no replacement for that initial validation before you start advertising. I refer to it being necessary to get some practical personas in place. And for those of you who might not be super familiar with personas, basically it's the idea of sort of fleshing out a complete description about your key user types and describing each of them. Some companies take it to what I would call ridiculous extremes, and they give them names, they talk about their pets and their personal life, and I can see for some companies where there's some value in that, but really it's just understanding, well, who am I speaking to and what are their very specific needs? What's important to them? And I mean, in our case, we recently, after going through literally 10 years of sales, we discovered that we serve almost exclusively entrepreneurs, founder-run businesses, owner-run businesses. We do work with other larger companies, but it's really those founders in our case. So, and that was in the process of getting ready to put a new website that's coming together. So that was really empowering. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, I know the needs of an entrepreneur. They're looking for, to minimize risk, and really they're looking for the absolute most practical way of approaching something that has the best outcome for success. Versus, and it might seem like a subtle difference, but if you're working with a marketing director in a Fortune 500 company, I hate to say this, but their very specific need is more or less to cover their ass. So in that case, you're really going to have different copy on your website. You're going to talk about different things. You're going to emphasize possibly the other large companies that you've worked with and basically give them sort of that confidence, versus with the entrepreneur, it's maybe going to be a more results-based focus. So again, everyone that you're going to be addressing, you really need to know exactly what they need and exactly how you're going to communicate with them. And it seems really obvious, but again, you wouldn't believe the number of companies that just throw up a landing page or a website, have a few benefits on it. Actually, quite often they don't even have benefits, but rather just the features of their product. And it just doesn't work. So figure out who you're talking to and what you're going to say to them, absolutely, before you advertise. Another thing too is that some companies, when they advertise online, they'll send traffic directly to their homepage. Almost without exception, you're better to create a landing page environment where you can do rapid testing and basically follow all the best practices that are in place. That's not an absolute. For instance, if you're a new startup with just a single product, maybe your homepage is almost just like a landing page, because you're not having to worry about sending people to all different sections of the site. But we won't dig too deep into this, and there's a lot of great information around landing page strategy. But essentially, you need a really tight funnel. You'll notice in most landing page experiences, they've actually removed the navigation. Again, simply because this is a separate page specifically for advertising only. It's not for SEO, and it's not for people who are already customers. It's just a really streamlined funnel there. There's a clear and attractive call to action on your landing page. You really need benefit-driven copy. And in terms of that, it's in a sense, it can be quite challenging, and very few companies really do a great job of it. But it's just, again, matching that persona. Okay, well, what do the people who you're targeting, what do they need? What's the most important benefit that's going to make them sign up, or in the example on the screen, do a free trial? It should be scannable. Folks don't have a lot of attention. I mean, I love long copy, but essentially, whether through the headlines or through a few strategic bullets, somebody should be able to absorb what the page is all about, literally at a glance. Obviously, I think it needs to be attractive and well branded. Social proof can really help in terms of legitimate reviews or references to clients. As well, what we call credibility indicators are really important. And on the example in this screenshot, they show as credibility indicators, they speak of 3 million users and 70,000 organizations. That's some significant credibility. This isn't a complete list, but just really some of the things that you want to think about. And in short, you need to become really good at building a landing page experience for your startup if you're going to do digital advertising. So some other basics, just in terms of measurement and analytics. I mean, it's pretty amazing these days. All the analytics tools that we generally use are free. No excuse not to be using analytics. We love to see people who will take it a step further and use Google Tag Manager, which essentially with analytics, Google Tag Manager allows you to do more advanced goals. You can set timers on pages. You can track and set a goal if somebody clicks to go to a different page. You can set goals based on people watching your videos, and just gives you a really much more clear understanding of what's going on your site. Then in terms of setting goals in analytics, and essentially a goal is something that you want somebody to do on your website. Ultimately, if you're selling something, you want somebody to make a purchase, and you'll have the advanced e-commerce tracking set up. Or if you're generating leads or signups, free trials, whatever that is, those sort of ones you'll have conversion goals. So that if somebody signs up, hits start free trial, you get their information, then that'll trigger a thank you page. That thank you page triggers a conversion goal that shows up as a completed goal in analytics. So there's all these different goals. And the other thing too is when you're brand new to it, often it's going to take a little while before you'll see those conversion goals. And so if you're just starting from scratch and, hey, maybe folks aren't going to buy from you on the first visit. Remember, we were talking about the funnel being empty at the start. You need to build some volume up in your funnel before people will likely start buying. So in that case, setting up a goal of people visiting, say, 3 or more pages, that might be super relevant. And then that allows you to do a couple things. It allows you to set conversion-based targeting and optimization within your advertising accounts. And even though it's not that final purchase conversion that you really want, it helps feed the algorithms and feed the engines in Google, Facebook, or wherever you're working in, and gets you moving quicker. Another thing, this UTM, it's a tracking mechanism. It actually stands for Urchin Tracking Mechanism, I believe, which Urchin was the product that Google bought and turned into Google Analytics. And essentially what that does is it just allows you to add a little hook or a little tiny bit of information to any link on any advertising platform, and then it will automatically show up as a campaign in Google Analytics. So in this example, you can see there's a screenshot from Analytics, and you can see there's all these Facebook CPC, which is the source. Facebook's the source. CPC is the medium, which stands for cost per click. There's LinkedIn in there. There's Google. And so Google CPC or Google advertising will automatically show up as a campaign in Analytics. But then by adding this UTM parameter to your links for the other platforms, you can see your campaign information and break out results and response by campaign and compare apples to apples for all these different platforms. And it's just invaluable to do that. In a perfect world, we'd be looking at a bigger screenshot that carried over and showed exactly, it shows conversions, purchases, all the information on a campaign by campaign basis. If you're going to do advertising, you have to do this basically if you want any chance of succeeding. The other interesting thing too in analytics now is you can actually look at different attribution models. And so a lot of folks don't even realize that by default, Google Analytics, when it tracks a conversion, so somebody signed up for your free trial and Google tracks that conversion, or if somebody makes a purchase and that purchase gets tracked, by default, Google Analytics is looking only at the last click. So it's looking at a last click model. They call it last interaction here, which means that if, let's just say that I was doing Facebook advertising for my t-shirt company, and somebody clicked on an ad at lunchtime, saw a bunch of shirts, thought, hey, those look great. After work, I'm gonna go back and buy a shirt. They remember the name of the company or type it into Google, see an ad for that company, or even just click them in organic search. Whatever the way that they arrived at that site was, the last click before they purchased, that's going to be recorded as what generated the sale under that last interaction model. And that's obviously not accurate, but fortunately you can do, you can see in that one screenshot there listing the different models that you can look at. So you can do the last non-direct click or the first interaction. So you could break out all your sales according to the first ad that somebody clicked on or the first way that they came to the website. Usually what we use with most of our clients is the position-based one that you see down at the bottom there. And basically what we do with that is if we really want to compare exactly where all the dollars are coming from, we'll have a look through a couple of those models, but typically the most important one being that position-based model that puts the emphasis for a conversion. It attributes a conversion mostly to the first and last click in the sequence, but then provides some attribution for the whole sort of range of other website visits. I know that's getting a little, probably a little more complex than we would get into in this call, but super powerful. And again, everything I just described is 100% free. So absolutely need to get on there. Something in the basics too that's also just absolutely 100% critical, and I've learned how important it is to get this way from the start, is that you need to really have a philosophy of experimentation. Most companies, maybe kind of wishfully in the back of their head kind of think, oh yeah, we'll throw some ads up and we'll start making some sales and we'll kind of grow it from there. I hate to say it, but realistically, what's going to happen is that the first experiment probably isn't going to generate any sales. Realistically, you're probably going to want to do a bunch of different tests, and that's to find how you're going to sell. And so, of course, the challenge there, if you're in a winning and losing mindset, this gets pretty soul crushing quite quickly. So really the way you have to look at it is each experiment is a learning opportunity. And I just can't emphasize enough how important that is to bear in mind. See a couple questions coming in. Again, I'll tackle any super quick ones mid-presentation, but we'll leave. I see Lawrence's question, and Lawrence will definitely answer that when we get to the Q&A, but I'll hold off on that for the moment. So now, in terms of, let's have a look at it. Now that I've sort of first scared you and then showed a little bit of how we're going to measure this, let's look at what really does work. And first, we're going to talk about a couple of overall concepts that you should bring to the advertising. And then after that, we'll talk about some specific types of ads. And it's funny because when I was originally planning this presentation, I was sort of picturing it as basically focusing on the ads themselves. But in really thinking about it, if you don't do this other stuff, if you don't get your head wrapped around the concepts, it's unlikely that the ads are going to work. You really do need to do that work up front and bring that experimentation mindset. So all that said, first thing is competitor research. As I mentioned here, it's really never been easier to do competitor research. There's tools like SpyFu, SPYFU, which is absolutely fantastic to be able to see your competitor keywords for both advertising and SEO. If there are large competitors that have been doing Google search ads historically, you can actually go and see their ads. They've tracked the ad history of all the large advertisers out there, so you can actually see the evolution of different ads and campaigns. You can use tools like SpyFu does it, but another tool we use on Moz.com called Open Site Explorer allows you to run a report and see everybody who's everybody who's linking to your competitor. So, if you're doing an SEO or really any kind of strategy, going and finding out everybody who's linking to somebody is just huge. Again, same with the keywords as well. Knowing what keywords people are paying for in their ads versus knowing what ones they're using organically in SEO, just absolutely huge. And then lastly, of course, I mentioned here the competitor call to actions. It's not hard to basically go to go to search or go to their website and find out for companies similar to yours, and sometimes not necessarily even in the same industry, but companies that have a similar value prop in a different industry, what sort of tactics and strategies are they using? Are they doing discounts? Are they offering a free trial? Are they getting people to sign up for a demo? Sort of how are they, what calls to action are they using, particularly on their landing pages where they're doing the paid search? What calls to action are they getting people to sign up with? And I make the kind of funny note here that if you are learning from your competitors, really important to make sure you pick ones who are doing a good job. And not everybody does a great job. And this is funny, it's often particularly true if you're looking at large national organizations. I was looking at the mortgage industry recently and doing a presentation on that. And it's interesting, the big banks, for instance, they have so much money and I guess know exactly what their customer lifetime value, or maybe they don't know exactly what their customer lifetime value is, but basically they can afford to not do a good job in search. Almost without exception, the big banks were just doing, in the research we did, we're just doing an absolutely horrible job on their advertising and landing pages for online mortgages. So again, definitely want to pick up some understanding and learning about how to do competitive research. And I provided a bit.ly link here of, we actually have a webinar that we just ran last week that's a purely educational webinar about doing your own competitive research. So if you're curious, I'd encourage you to go have a look at that recorded, the webinar that we archived. And I think you get we had some great feedback on it. So I think you find some interesting information on that front. And we do get into some depth on these tools. And I alluded to this a little bit earlier, but you really want to look at these micro tests. Again, it's everybody's wish, and sometimes it happens that, hey, we'll launch some ads, we'll start making sales, and we'll start getting users. Life is good, we'll scale it, and then we'll retire to the Caribbean. I guess that's not happening anytime soon with travel restrictions, but long story short, 9 times out of 10, that doesn't happen. Almost every time you're going to run some tests, and especially if they're the very first ones that you're doing, they're probably not going to work. And I hate to say that, and I don't want it to sound negative, but really, again, it's just understanding the reality of what happens, and there are ways around this. So essentially what we want to do is, rather than put a whole ton of energy and money into a large test or a large advertising launch, definitely look and strategize, okay, how can we run the largest number of meaningful tests with the lowest budget possible? That's really what you want to do. And so I can think of one example, a company out of California we're working with right now, where we launched something like 15 different campaigns in the first month. And they were sort of fully on board with the plan. And these tests were literally just, some of them sort of $200 to $300 per test. And again, in their case, as I was talking about before with the, and what I allude to here is this validation ladder, is we started with engagement goals. It was really a process of, hey, let's make sure that we can drive clicks from the ads. So that your click-through rate on the ad, how the percentage that people click through on the ad when seeing it, that's your first sort of front-end indicator. And that's all well and good, but of course you want to make sure that after somebody's clicked, that they are actually interested in what you're offering. So that's where you have these engagement goals. And again, from a realistic perspective, you're probably not going to sign up a ton of trial users or get a bunch of demo signups on your very first few campaigns. You're still kind of learning how to do this, but absolutely checking those engagement goals. How long did somebody stay on a page? How many pages did they look at? What actions did they do? And you can definitely start to see, well, some of your campaigns, so let's say we've got half a dozen campaigns going, what's probably going to happen is 1 or 2 of them have a really good engagement, and there's a couple that are probably looking just horrible from an engagement perspective. So that's where it's kind of like, okay, well, let's take those two that are showing some promise, boost the engagement, work our way up that validation ladder on that, and then you'll see the conversions start to land. You'll see the signups starting to happen. You'll see the sales start to happen. That does take a while, and you definitely need to, you've got to crawl before you can walk. So you really do need to move through that process. That said, there are exceptions, and we hope for that every time. But realistically, it is a process that almost everybody has to go through. Kind of tongue in cheek here, but taking out the trash. And it's interesting because we tend to focus really on what's working, but sometimes I've seen companies that really have promising campaigns, but overall they don't look great. And what in some of those situations, it's just as simple as figuring out what's not working and removing the things that aren't working. So for example, sometimes geographic regions behave extremely differently, particularly with business to consumer offerings. Business to business is a little bit more consistent, but business to consumer, somebody in Washington State is probably going to behave totally differently than someone in Texas. So if you can go in and identify the geographic regions that aren't working and remove them with a few quick setting adjustments, you can double or triple the effectiveness of your campaigns. Networks and devices as well. It's funny, you can see I'm proudly wearing my Google Partners t-shirt here today. I really do like Google. I think they're a responsible company. That said, one of the things that drives me nuts about them is that on their display network advertising, apps and games are automatically opted in as placements. And almost without exception, the app and game traffic is just absolute garbage. There are sometimes when it works a bit differently, but in general, what we find is you have app and game manufacturers whose goal is to try and get you to click on an ad, often by mistake, just because they get a tiny cut of that. So what we typically see is really bad results on that front. So that's a situation where it's a little challenging to remove the apps and games, but absolutely worth it if you're going to advertise on the display network. Also, some of the different advertising platforms allow you to opt into the partner networks or not. So in Google's case, if you opt into the partner network, you're opting into like Google Maps and properties like that, usually okay. With Facebook, the partners involve different companies that have the Facebook pixel on the site. I'm probably not describing that exactly correctly, but and in our case in general, we haven't seen much in the way of good results from their partner network. So I'm not saying it is one way or another, but definitely something to be aware of and watch out for. So here's finally we get to the meat of it, the fun stuff. Some things that are actually working. And all these examples are areas where I've seen advertising working quite well in 2020. Really big thing, particularly right now in our current situation, is that the advertising landscape changes all the time. What worked 5 years ago almost certainly doesn't work right now, at least not in terms of the exact techniques to use it. So you really want to get good at monitoring the trends and then moving in front of them or at that leading edge. And again, that's where, as a startup, you have a fantastic advantage over more established companies that tend to think in a much more linear manner and don't necessarily spot those sort of trends. So video is one huge area that's sort of blown wide open in the last 6 months. You can see from this chart that one of our contacts at Google actually sent this over for a report that they put together for us, and essentially since March, video traffic has just absolutely gone through the roof. And this is a little different than search. So, I mean, there are some search areas that have grown, certainly anything to do with working from home, remote working, that sort of thing. search has bumped up, but with folks not traveling, with folks spending so much more time at their computer, video consumption has just gotten huge. And with that in mind, what that does is that actually opens up a ton of inventory at lower cost, because basically it's a competitive marketplace. So it is other advertisers vying for the inventory that drives up the prices. So right now there's some great advertising around video that is way more cost effective than it has been in the past. So that's an opportunity. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have a video ad, because, and quite frankly, video ads, you have to invest a fair bit to get something that looks well and is really strategic, to have a video ad that works. But even just banners, you can place banners around different video ads. And of course, video itself does work great. One thing to look at, and again, in terms of the trends, is that both Facebook and LinkedIn right now are really encouraging people to use video. So that is an area where the actual video can work really well. I'd say the advice on YouTube would be to look at targeting video topics where people are consuming video content that are relevant to your business and startup, and there's some really dirt cheap inventory in those places. Facebook and LinkedIn, however, if you can create video, they're both those platforms are doing their damnedest not to become irrelevant in the whole video thing as compared to YouTube. So they make it really cheap to do video ads right now. Working with interestingly, a law enforcement technology startup out of California right now. And in their case, I think it worked out to about 60 cents per completed view of a video to the exact law enforcement type of folks that they were looking at that are in administration. In looking at sort of the lack of trade shows to travel to right now, where they would usually get their business, they were exceedingly happy with that. Facebook, you can get even cheaper views on that, and particularly, there are a lot of job titles on Facebook. More and more, there are hundreds of thousands of people who have placed their job title on their profile, and you can target it according to job titles. So I used to consider Facebook to absolutely not be business to business, but it's developed so that there are some fun opportunities there. And you can get video viewed on Facebook for next to nothing, sort of 10 cents a view, 15 cents a view, which is very reasonable, as long as you have a strategic sort of video there that you can leverage. Competitor targeting is something that is huge. I mean, you can, the simple and obvious one is you can target people searching for your competitor in Google search, but that doesn't typically work out quite as well as we might think. However, in the example of this screenshot, and these settings literally changed last week. Google used to offer way more granular settings for this sort of targeting. But if you look in the screenshot there, it says, or people who browse websites similar to blank. So in this case, all we have to do is add the URL or URLs of competitors, and Google will look for people who are looking at websites, air quotes, similar to those. Google's kind of, and quite frankly, when they're looking to meet your demand to get people who are looking at a website that is similar, they're first going to see if there's traffic, if there's an audience out there of people that have been going to that website. So long story short, there are some industries like customer relationship management is a great example, different sort of business services, business-to-business SaaS software, where clicks in search can literally cost $15 to $40 per click. Just crazy, and not the sort of cost that most startups want to absorb. That said, if you can identify the websites where folks are spending that money and getting people to their website, you can sort of ride along on their coattails and get clicks on the display network for typically 50 cents to $1 sort of range. And I can tell you that we definitely have had some breakthrough successes on that front. Again, bear in mind on the display network, as I mentioned, you've got to get the games and apps the heck out of there. And there's a few other things, including testing your way into that, but definitely some great opportunities. So Facebook and LinkedIn both have similar lead ads now, or lead form ads. We'll talk about the Facebook one first, and the technique in particular. I didn't include our client screenshot just for privacy reasons, but we actually had our most successful contest ever this summer for a West Coast destination. So advertising within British Columbia for this West Coast destination. And they got something along the lines of 3,000 newsletter signups that signed up as part of, and explicitly worded so that it followed, of course, all the email regulations, but basically 3,000 new email subscribers at a cost of 8 cents per subscriber using a contest in conjunction with a Facebook lead ad. And what the lead ad is it's similar to this, well, this actually is exactly what this auto ad in the screenshot shows, is that you can basically sign up right within Facebook for something. There's no landing page needed. Somebody doesn't have to leave Facebook. It's just, boom, a really streamlined sign up. And if you offer something that's attractive, folks can do it in seconds and they can work extremely well. Facebook does also work for sort of inbound marketing techniques. So offering a piece of educational content through a Facebook sign up works really well. Also, I would be remiss if I didn't mention, if you're doing a contest, make absolutely certain that what you have as a prize is relevant to your offering. And basically, in a perfect world, the prize should identify that somebody would be a legitimate, likely user of your product, if presented the option. So I had years ago, we had a horrible experience of doing an iPad giveaway for a contest, and I got to discover that there's actually a weird and unique subculture of people online that literally just enter contests as a hobby. And let me tell you, signing up 1,000 of those sort of people doesn't do anybody any good. So really keep that relevance in mind. And again, the LinkedIn lead generation ads, they're also can be great. They seem to work best in conjunction with inbound marketing. So again, typically, some sort of white paper or case study or guide that you're offering if somebody signs up. Like with Facebook, nobody needs to leave the platform and go to a landing page, and they convert dramatically higher than traditional LinkedIn ads and external pages. And a big reason for that is that the LinkedIn ads, the default ads, don't work that well. They're not very prominent. They set off to the side. So generally, we only do advertising now that one way or another is in the feed in LinkedIn. So that typically, and basically there's two things that do that. One is these lead ads, and the other one is promoted content. So those are kind of the best opportunities right now in LinkedIn. And I don't have a specific explicit slide for that, but the promoted content in LinkedIn can work great. If you have something that people will pick up and share, LinkedIn promoted content is an excellent way of getting that process going. So everybody's probably familiar with sort of retargeting or remarketing. Interestingly, those two terms mean the exact same thing, except for whatever reason, Google calls it remarketing and Facebook calls it retargeting. Again, totally synonymous. Most companies be like, yeah, we're gonna advertise to everybody that visited our website in the last month. That's all well and good and can actually be effective, but if you're driving some decent volumes of traffic, you want to get more granular than that. And this can make the difference between retargeting, having a positive ROI or not. And so the most obvious one that we do all the time on high traffic websites is only targeting people that visited, say, 3 pages or more, 4 pages or more, whatever engagement goal for that site we kind of judge to be relevant. And so essentially you can, I talked about creating goals for those. You can also create audiences of those sort of things. So basically set it so that Google gathers a remarketing or retargeting audience based on people that have that frequency on your pages. Facebook basically works the same. The screenshots here are both pulled from within analytics. And it's funny when I grabbed the screenshot for the technology and everything, I was kind of like, wow, I really need to get even more granular. And kind of forgotten, like, oh yeah, you can do retargeting based on operating system. You can do it based on their traffic source. So if you have a great big campaign that has a specific theme, you can advertise to only people that came through that campaign and retarget them. And then there's some simple criteria as well. You can see the screenshot that has that new audience red button on there. Those are the examples of audience names from this particular example. And so you can have the all visitors, or even an obvious one is you can remove people. In this example, you see the syntax is page not contain thank you. Basically, that removes anybody who converted so that you're not pestering them with ads for something that they already signed up for. Anyhow, there's a ton of fun retargeting technology in there. And essentially, if you're leveraging analytics, the first thing to do is go in and create the audience, and then the audience starts building. So I really like search advertising. I don't get to work much personally in the ads myself anymore, but it's a really highly competitive and fun area with a lot of value there still. To compete well in search ads, you definitely need to do some study and learning to know how to do it and to get good at it. That said, there are 2 areas that sometimes have some low-hanging fruit. One is to learn about intent and keywords that indicate that somebody has high intent to purchase something. So in the one example, sorry about that, you can see somebody's Googling for an AquaQuest LT 1000P. If somebody has a very, very specific search for a product that has that, sometimes even the model number or the serial number, that pretty much means that they're in the market to buy it. And that works for a lot of things. If you're doing e-commerce and you're selling in Canada, for instance, and a great high intent qualifier is if somebody puts Canada at the end of their search. So if it was like Levi's 501s online Canada, including that term Canada in the phrase means that it matters to somebody where they're shipping from. So that's another example of high intent. There's a whole ton of those. I'd love to dig in a bit further on that front, but no time for that today. And the other thing too is niche terms that might have, they're going to have less search volume, but they'll also have less competition and better differentiation. And in that example, I talked earlier about how competitive CRM is as an area. However, so here's an example where instead of just battling it out in the broad market, you might instead compete over CRM for lawyers is the example here. Again, there'll be less traffic volume, but way less competition. And also if it matches with an area of differentiation that you have, you're way more likely to succeed with it. So, and I don't know, probably can't read that, but in the top example, there's Freshworks that their headline is law firm CRM software. That's probably going to convert quite well. Down at the bottom, there's this Capsule CRM that has an ad that says Capsule CRM, easy all-in-one CRM. That's a pretty awful headline that absolutely is not going to work for this particular keyword. So again, this is where niching down and getting more granular on exactly what you're offering can make a big difference, as well as if you can leverage that along with your landing page strategy so that you actually have a landing page that is specific to the niche term that you're focusing on. And as well, between either the landing page platforms or even if most companies are using WordPress these days, you can, in a matter of literally under 5 minutes, you can duplicate a landing page and change enough language to make it so that it will convert dramatically better than a generic one. So some layered search audiences are another area. And essentially, so you're targeting in search on the basis of what keywords somebody is searching for, but you can also, like we're talking about with the display network, you can also define audiences. So you can set certain demographics, whether it's men or women or certain age ranges. You can go through all the different audiences that are available on the display network. Maybe in this example, if someone's interested in software or enterprise software, if one of those was highly relevant. By selecting those audiences, you can either observe, which means that you can watch how that audience is responding and then decide down the road if you want to just narrow down to them, or you can choose to target just those audiences. And in doing so, in that example, only somebody that was currently in the market for enterprise software would see your search ads at all. So in that case, that would be highly effective in weeding out people that are doing just very preliminary research or searching with non-purchase intent. So that can be super powerful. And again, it doesn't cost anything to add those options. So adding those options for observation can be hugely effective in terms of just being able to see if it would work to optimize for a specific audience. And interestingly, you can also boost certain audiences. So you might find that enterprise people, it works a little bit better if enterprise software people than non. And so you can actually tell Google to boost the bid by 20% for people that are in that enterprise software audience. Tons of opportunities in there. Google Shopping is another fantastic opportunity that doesn't always work, but it's quite low cost. The clicks are a fraction usually of what search clicks are. So it's cheap to try out. And then when it does work, it can be ridiculously profitable. And for those of you not familiar with Google Shopping, that's basically the images and the links you see over on the right-hand side of the screen, where if you're searching for a product or product type, you'll see those pop up and then you click through. They work in conjunction with the Google Merchant Center. So if you're working with Shopify or if you're working with WooCommerce, they both make it really easy to set up and definitely worth trying out. Along those lines, I was picking on app and game placements. Like in general, for a normal product, you probably don't want to be advertising in apps and games. That said, if your product is an app or a game, you can leverage the Firebase tool from Google that will essentially connect your app with analytics and conversion tracking with analytics and advertising. And then you can launch these app and game campaigns that, like the Google Shopping, they rely on Google's algorithm. And they can, if they work, they can help you scale an app like nothing else. So there's a screenshot in there that's anonymous, but it's of an account I worked on a few years ago myself. And as you can see, they actually had 341,000 signups over a period of about a year and an average cost per signup for their app of 32 cents, which at the time, until they did a big pivot on their business model, that was basically the best thing that had ever happened for that company and their app. So, and again, it's really just trying a bunch of different things. That's actually a fantastic example because I think in talking about the experimentation, I once went through and I think I counted over the lifetime before the pivot, I think we ran something like 150 different tests for that particular client, and actually still do some work with them today post pivot. But yeah, again, the app and game campaigns can be just huge if they work. And the clicks are cheap as well. Creative custom audiences. Again, this is looking at the Google Display Network, but it definitely applies to Facebook as well. You can jump in and create audiences, people based on their demographic, based on browsing their competitor websites, and you can layer those things. So you can have, say, cloud services power users, example from this shot, who have visited sites like your competition. Super powerful, or rather, I should say it can be super powerful if you experiment with a few things like that. And again, the one thing I had mentioned is that the display network is really cost effective, so you can afford to run a bunch of different tests. Another thing that if you're a company that, maybe you're in an awareness building phase, or if there is a component of awareness in a marketplace that's important to you, it can be dirt cheap to literally own an audience. And that's where, again, this is often if it's a case where you're confident with your product market fit. The screenshots here, there's a couple things. One was for my own research. Through our Jumpstart Web Marketing, we do some legal marketing. So looking at audiences of lawyers who are self-identified as lawyers on Facebook, you see, if we look at Canada and then Washington, Oregon, California, there's 7,000 people that fit that description. If we look at Canada and the US, Facebook users who are self-identified as lawyers and attorneys, there's 31,000 of those. Those are very manageable numbers. So in that case, if you're positive that you're a good fit in the legal market, you can become the most known company of your type extremely cost effectively. What you want to do in that case is rather than focus on clicks or cost per click, you want to focus, probably bid on a CPM basis, which is a cost per thousand, and focus on frequency and impressions. And basically the frequency is the number of impressions per person per week in this example. And then of course, an important thing along that, as well as you're probably offering them hopefully some great content or educational content or something of interest as you go. Identify how to get those folks to take action. And then another example there, also from Facebook, is people whose field of study was either software engineering, computer science, or whose job title includes those things. If you need to reach a whole ton of developers in this example, it's British Columbia and Washington. It's like, there's 51,000 software engineers and developers immediately available to you in BC and Washington. And it would cost, I'm going to say probably about $200 a month to be the most seen product of your type to that specific audience. Lookalike audiences can be huge. I see we're just going to wrap up momentarily, so we've got some time for Q&A. But lookalike audiences, basically, if you have you can upload contacts to LinkedIn and make similar audiences to your existing contacts. You have to be quite careful to be responsible in terms of privacy around these audiences, and the platforms are quite vigilant on that. So you definitely don't want to do anything sort of out of line. But LinkedIn does absolutely allow you to upload your contacts and advertise directly to them, or B, create lookalike audiences, people that share the same attributes. Same with Facebook. On Facebook, you can create lookalike audiences based on your customers, on your fans on your page, or even the people who have added to cart. If you don't have enough customers to create a really good link, a lookalike audience, instead you could go to that one level down of engagement and target people very similar to those who have added to cart. Definite opportunities on that front for a lot of companies. And again, just getting to wrap up here. One thing I would say, particularly with our climate right now, with everybody kind of locked in, is that inbound marketing has been huge. Technically, it's not an ad type, but folks are hungry for information. There's lots of things that are changing, lots of things that are new, anything with how somebody runs a business. Lots and lots of people are out seeking information now. So doing inbound marketing and providing education on certain topics can be very effective. That's something we've been doing in our own company since March. I really wanted to do something proactive in this time, and it's been great. We've feel really good about educating people, and we've also won a bunch of clients, because anytime you educate an audience on how to do something, typically there's a bunch of folks that really appreciate the education and are glad to know about it, but then are like, well, I don't want to do that myself, or I don't have the resources to do that myself. And that's kind of where this HubSpot's flywheel model comes in. They're looking at the flywheel more than the funnel. Now, I think the funnel still provides a good metaphor for some conversion operations, but what we've been doing individually is the sort of flywheel thing that they advocate, and it's worked great for us. So here we go, on to Q&A. Short break for a shameless plug. First off, I'm really glad to have had the opportunity to speak today. I am available for any questions. Feel free to email me or get in touch through the thing in Vancouver Startup Week. Happy to connect on LinkedIn. I am very happy to answer questions. Gotten to a fun point where basically it's my job now to support our team and answer questions of people who are interested in web marketing and consult with folks. So always happy for folks to reach out. And should you be interested in help with any of the sort of things that I've talked about, we've got just a fantastic team that does everything from website development through the multi-channel advertising and promotion. With that said, that's it for the formal part of today's presentation. I know some folks will be leaving, so don't hesitate to drop off, but I'm happy to stick around and answer any and all questions. And again, if you do have to go but want something answered, feel free to hit me up. And I think I noticed as well that Startup Week was going to make recordings available if it's okay with the speakers. That's certainly fine with us. So I imagine this presentation will be archived somewhere as well. But if you do want the slides, actually happy to send out a copy or link to the slides. Just send me a note. And with that said, let's have a look. So my moderation panel is blank, but I can see some questions here in the Q&A. So we'll start with Lawrence here, and feel free to drop any more questions into the chat here, into the session chat, or if you can figure out how to raise your hand and get control of the mic, you're welcome to do that as well. So Lawrence asks, if you have a marketplace, how many landing pages will you make for paid search? Vehicle marketplace available in every city in North America. Would you go as deep as creating a lander for every combo of make, model, city? Wow, that's a tough one. That sounds like an almost infinite number of pages. So a couple things. One is that advertising that makes reference to a region will work better, almost without exception. And I know that looking with a auto repair chain that we got to know that, and they had done this before we started working with them, but their landing page strategy involved having, rather than one landing page that listed locations and pointed people to it, they moved to landing pages for each individual location and mentioned that location prominently, and it worked way better for them. What I would suggest, and this, Lawrence, probably goes way beyond what we can chat about today, but there are opportunities for dynamic headlines and that sort of thing. So I think there's probably a combination between breaking out several different types of landing pages, but then hooking that in with some dynamic landing pages or dynamic headlines on those landing pages. So basically, if somebody clicks from one ad, there could be one headline appears from a different ad, a different headline. And Shalia mentions the good advice on all competitors not doing a good job. And that, what do you consider a low budget from Autumn? And we did touch on that. Maybe to go in just a bit further depth on that front, to pick one of those sort of custom audiences, like a narrow custom audience on the Google Display Network, a couple $100 can give you a good idea of whether that audience has a level of interest or not. Are they engaging on the website? Maybe you'll even get them to sign up for something. If you're Facebook, fairly similar. Clicks are a little costlier. So, and just to back that up, clicks on the display network are typically sort of, let's say 40 to 80 cents. Ton of factors and it changes a lot, but call that typical. Facebook, more likely to be 60 cents to $1.50, so a little more expensive. So $200 will still definitely get, well, I shouldn't say definitely because there's nothing definite, but would almost, in what we would expect a $200 budget to get 100 people to your site. So, and possibly even more than that, depending on the cost per click. So again, that's a good sort of small test budget to establish, is there any interest? And again, in that case, with your first 100 visitors, you're not necessarily going to have someone sign up, but you can see, oh, did they look at multiple pages? Did they stay on the website? Are we going in the right direction, or did they all bounce? So that provides some great information on that front. And on the flip side, so LinkedIn, probably need about $400 for a test on LinkedIn. And Google search is an interesting one because Google search requires, and I love search, but it requires quite a bit more setup up front. So it really depends how many different topics and sort of keyword groupings you're going to use. So basically synonymous with topics. So if you had 10 different topics that you were going to run under one campaign, you probably need to be spending a couple $100 per topic. So you'd actually be looking at $2,000 to launch your complete search test there. That said, there are ways of keeping that down, like again, focusing only on super high intent or super niche terms and keeping it narrow, so you could do just one or two ad groups and sort of do a test with sort of $400, $500, $600 in click costs and see if you did get that engagement.